"Mom, why don't we have a dad?" Selene's hand stopped. The spoon just sat there over the bowl, sauce dripping off the edge, and she didn't turn around. It was a Tuesday. Nothing special about it. They were parked behind a Walmart in Tucson, the same spot they'd used 3 times that month because the security guard on night shift didn't bother them. Dinner was canned soup heated on a portable burner. The van smelled like tomato and dirty laundry, and the pine tree air freshener Beckham had taken from a gas station bathroom because he thought it would make things nicer. Selene turned around slow, put one hand on Beckham's knee, one on Brecken's, and she smiled. Not a real smile. The kind of smile you learn to make when you've got nothing left but your kids are watching. "You have me. And I'm enough." Beckham nodded. He was 7. He'd figured out a while ago that some questions made Mom go quiet, and when Mom went quiet, you dropped it. He picked up his spoon. Brecken didn't. Brecken was 6 and he noticed things. He noticed when his mom counted the same handful of coins twice. He noticed when she skipped dinner and said she wasn't hungry. He noticed the way other kids got picked up from school. "Jalen's dad picks him up every day," Brecken said. "He carries his backpack. He puts his hand on Jalen's head. Like it's just normal." He looked at Solène. "Kids ask where our dad is. They call us homeless. They say nobody wants us." Solène pulled both boys into her, held them tight, kissed the top of one head, then the other. She didn't say anything for a while. She just held on. That question didn't go away after dinner. It sat in the van with them, took up space, and Solène knew she was running out of time. The boys were getting older. The questions were getting harder, and the truth was something she'd buried so deep, she almost convinced herself it wasn't real. Their mother was still married, legally married, to a man worth over $2 billion, a man living in an estate in the south of France, with staff and security, and people whose entire job was to find her. He'd been looking for them for 4 years. But Selene didn't run from him. She ran from his mother, the woman who tried to poison her. And that woman hadn't stopped looking either. Subscribe and stay with me on this one, because what this family is about to discover will break them, and then put them back together. The van was a 2007 Chrysler minivan, silver, though you wouldn't know it anymore. The paint had oxidized to this chalky grey that made it look like it had been sitting in the sun for 100 years. The odometer read 214,000 miles. The sliding door on the passenger side stuck unless you lifted it and shoved at the same time. The AC worked when it felt like it, which wasn't often, and in Bakersfield that mattered more than most things. They had spots, not addresses. Spots. Behind the Food Max on Brundage Lane was the regular, good lighting, which Selene said she liked because it made reading easier, but really it was because she could see anyone coming. The lot emptied out by 10 most nights, and nobody paid attention to a van parked near the loading dock if it was gone by 6 in the morning. The church on H Street was the backup, Tuesdays and Thursdays mostly, because those were the nights the pastor left the side door unlocked, and Selene could sneak the boys into the bathroom to brush their teeth with warm water instead of cold bottles. And there was the dirt pullout by the Kern River. That one was free and quiet and had a view of the water if you squinted past the trash that collected along the bank. But the mosquitoes out there hummed like grinding teeth. Brecken remembers lying in the back seat, listening to them bounce off the window screens Selene had made out of dollar store mesh and binder clips, and thinking that even the bugs in Bakersfield sounded angry. That was the world. 3 parking spots and a van that smelled like hand sanitizer and warm vinyl and whatever was on sale at the day-old bread rack. Home. Selene had a system for everything, not because she was organized by nature, but because when you have nothing, systems are what keep you from falling apart. Laundry was Wednesdays. She'd wait until the Denny's on White Lane closed at midnight, then walk in through the back with a trash bag full of clothes and wash everything in the bathroom sink. She'd gotten friendly with one of the night cleanup guys, a man named Marco, who never asked questions and always left the door propped open with a mop bucket. She'd scrub their shirts and jeans with a bar of soap, wring them out one by one, carry them back to the van dripping wet in a plastic bag, and spread them across the dashboard and the backs of the seats to dry. In summer they'd be stiff and warm by morning. In winter, she'd run the engine and blast the heat for 20 minutes, which cost gas they didn't have, but she did it anyway. Brecken remembers sitting in the back watching her lay out their clothes one morning, smoothing each piece flat with her hands like she was setting a table. "See?" Solane said without turning around, just like a laundromat. "We're fancy." Beckham laughed. He always laughed at her jokes, even the ones that weren't funny, because he understood that his laughter was something she needed. Brecken didn't laugh. He watched his mother's hands and noticed they were shaking. Not a lot. Just enough. Solane had a gift for making things sound like choices. "This is an adventure," she'd say when they moved spots in the middle of the night, because someone complained or a security guard got too curious. She'd start the engine and pull out smooth and calm like they were heading somewhere good, somewhere planned. "Some people pay good money to sleep under stars like these," she told them once, when they were parked out by the river, and the sky was so clear you could see the Milky Way stretched out like a smear of white paint. She pointed up through the windshield and named constellations, some of them real, most of them made up, and the boys believed every single one. She told them they were lucky. She told them they were free. She told them that houses were just boxes, and boxes were for people who didn't know how to live. And they believed her. Because when you're 5, 6, 7 years old, and your mother is the only solid thing in your life, her voice is the truth. Whatever she says, that's what's real. Brecken believed those lies for years, held onto them like something precious. It wasn't until much later, until he was old enough to see them for what they were, that he understood. And he's still not sure he's forgiven the truth for replacing them. Beckham had one pair of shoes, Nike Air Max, grey and white, or they used to be. By the time Brecken started paying attention to them, they were closer to brown and yellow, the soles worn smooth as paper. There was a hole in the left toe, not a small one, the kind where your sock pokes through and gets wet the second you step in anything. Every morning before school, Beckham would sit on the edge of the van's bench seat and cut a piece of cardboard from whatever box they had. Cheerios boxes worked best because the cardboard was thin enough to fold, but stiff enough to last most of the day. He'd trace the shape of his foot with a pen, cut it out with a pair of kitchen scissors, fold it in half, and slide it into the shoe. By lunch, the cardboard would be soft. By afternoon, it would be falling apart. By the time he got back to the van, his socks would be damp, and he'd peel them off and lay them on the heating vent without saying a word. He did this for 11 months. 11 months of cutting cardboard and folding it into his shoe and walking on it and never once asking for new ones. Brecken watched him do it every single morning. And he understood something about poverty that nobody teaches you. You learn what questions cost. You learn that asking for new shoes, something that small, that basic, could be the thing that breaks your mother on a Tuesday morning when she's already held together by nothing. And you decide, at 9 years old, that your discomfort is a smaller price than her collapse. So you say nothing. You cut your cardboard. You keep walking. Money came in pieces, never whole, never enough. Solane had WIC vouchers for milk and cereal and peanut butter. She had a spot on the day labor list at the corner of Union and California, where men and a few women stood every morning at 5:30, waiting for someone to pull up in a truck and offer 8 hours of work for $60 cash. She cleaned houses. She cleaned offices. She cleaned a dog grooming shop on Ming Avenue for a woman who paid her under the table and let her take home expired pet shampoo, which Solane used on the boy's hair because it was free and it worked fine. She was stubborn in a way that went past personality and into something structural. Like stubbornness was a load-bearing wall inside her, and if she ever let it crack, the whole thing would come down. She never asked anyone for help, not family, because she said they didn't have any, not the state, beyond what WIC provided, not the shelters, because she said shelters meant paperwork, and paperwork meant questions, and questions meant someone might take her boys. That last part didn't make sense to Brecken at the time. Who would take them? Why? But Solane said it with such flat certainty that he didn't push. The stubbornness kept them fed. Barely. It kept them clothed. Mostly. It kept them together. Always. And in a life where everything else was uncertain, together was the only currency that mattered. Every Saturday morning, Solene drove them to the Beale Memorial Library on Truxton Avenue. She parked in the shade if she could find it, walked them in, and gave them one rule. 2 books each. Pick wisely. They'd spend an hour in there, sometimes 2. The library was air-conditioned and clean, and nobody looked at them funny. Nobody asked where they lived. You didn't need an address to read. You just needed a card, and Solene had gotten them cards using Diane Berger's address, same as school. At night, they'd read in the van. Solene kept a dome light that ran on the car battery, and she'd let them use it until 9, sometimes 9:30 if the book was good. When the battery started getting low, she'd switch them to flashlights. Dollar store flashlights that ate through batteries in a week, but she kept buying them because reading was the one thing she refused to let poverty touch. Brecken remembers the glow of those flashlights under blankets in the back seat, the way the pages looked yellow and warm, the way Beckham would whisper the good parts out loud even when he thought Brecken was asleep. They read differently. That's what Brecken noticed as they got older. Their books said something about who they were becoming. Beckham loved adventure stories, books with maps in the front and quests that took the characters somewhere far away. He liked stories where the hard parts had a reason, where suffering led to a mountain or a treasure or a door that opened into something better. He wanted to believe that hardship was noble if there was a destination, that all of this, the van, the parking lots, the cardboard in his shoes, was leading somewhere worth arriving. Brecken read differently. He picked realistic fiction, stories about families that looked like his, kids who were poor, kids who were angry, kids who were carrying things too heavy for their age. He didn't want fantasy. He didn't want maps. He wanted to see himself on a page and know that the story didn't end at the hard part, that someone had written past it, that there was an after. They never talked about why they chose what they chose. They didn't have to. The books said it for them. Solene read too. Every night after the boys were asleep, she'd sit in the driver's seat with the dome light on low and read. Toni Morrison, Marilyn Robinson, James Baldwin. Books with cracked spines and library stamps and pencil notes in the margins that Solene would read as carefully as the text itself. One night Brecken woke up and saw his mother mouthing words in the front seat, finger tracing a line in Song of Solomon. He pretended to be asleep, but watched through half-closed eyes as Solene closed the book and just sat there for a moment, staring at the cover. The structure falls apart in the second act, Solene whispered to nobody. Morrison knew it. She did it on purpose. Brecken filed that away. Didn't think about it much at the time, but years later, looking back, he realized that should have been the first clue. Women who live in vans and wash clothes in Denny's bathrooms and stand on day labor corners at 5:30 in the morning do not typically have opinions about the narrative structure of Toni Morrison novels. Their mother was not who her circumstances said she was, and it was right there, in plain sight, the whole time. Birthdays were untouchable. Solene treated them like holy days. The one thing poverty was not allowed to reach. She'd go to the Vons on Stockdale Highway the day before and buy cupcakes from the day-old rack. Chocolate usually, because both boys liked chocolate, with frosting that had started to crust at the edges but still tasted sweet enough. She'd buy candles from the Dollar Tree and walk out with a face that said, "Arrest me if you want," because Brecken is fairly certain she never once paid for those candles. They'd sit on the hood of the van at sunset. Solene would stick the candles in the cupcakes and light them with a gas station lighter and sing This Little Light of Mine completely off-key. Her voice cracked on the high notes, and she never got the timing right, and it was entirely perfect. Brecken would close his eyes and feel the warmth of the hood through his jeans and listen to his mother's terrible singing and actually believe that he had a light. Because his mother said so. She said it every birthday. "You have a light, baby. Don't let anyone blow it out." And a mother's word, when you are small and the world is dark, is the only lantern you need. But lanterns only work when they are lit. And theirs was about to go out. If this story is already getting to you, hit subscribe now, because where this goes next is something none of them saw coming. School was a different kind of survival. Longfellow Elementary. They were enrolled using Diane Berger's address on Oleander Avenue so they could stay in the district. Diane was a woman Selene had met at a food bank 3 years earlier. She didn't ask questions. She let Selene use her mailbox. She let the school believe 2 boys lived at her address, even though those boys slept in a van that moved between 3 parking spots, depending on which one felt safe that week. Every morning Selene would park somewhere near the school, wake the boys at 6:30 and start the routine. The routine was everything. The routine was the wall between their real life and the version of their life they showed the world. She laid out their clothes the night before. Thrift store clothes, always clean, always pressed with a travel iron she plugged into a power inverter connected to the car battery. The shirts had fraying seams and the pants were sometimes a half-inch too short, but they were clean and they were pressed, and that was the point. She'd comb Brecken's hair until it was neat and smooth. She'd check Beckham's collar, adjust his sleeves, make sure nothing was stained or torn or visibly wrong. "Pain is temporary," she'd say, while pulling a comb through a knot. "Looking put together is armor." She said it like a fact, like gravity, and the boys believed it the way they believed everything she said, because her voice was still the only truth they had. She sent them out every morning, looking like kids who had a home and a bathroom and a closet. Kids who had breakfast at a table and slept in beds with sheets. The armor worked from a distance. Up close was a different story. Because kids know, they always know. You can press the shirts and comb the hair and make sure the socks match, and it doesn't matter. Kids can smell it through the pressed cotton and the neat part lines. They pick up on things adults miss. The shoes that never change. The lunch that's always the free one. The way you flinch when someone asks what your house looks like. The way you change the subject when someone mentions their bedroom or their backyard or their dog. Kids are bloodhounds for weakness. They don't need evidence. They need a feeling. And once they have the feeling, they follow it until they find what they're looking for. It was only a matter of time before someone at Longfellow followed the scent all the way to the Food Max parking lot. His name was Trent Muller. Brecken uses his real name because he wants it to sit in Trent's mouth if he ever hears this story. Trent was in their grade. He lived in a house on Bernard Street with a yard and a dog and 2 parents who picked him up in a truck every afternoon. He was the kind of kid who had never wanted for anything and had decided that this made him better than people who had. He'd seen them. Walking from the Food Max parking lot one morning, Brecken and Beckham cutting through the side lot, past the loading dock, backpacks on, heading towards school, and Trent had been in the back seat of his mother's car, waiting at the light on Brundage, and he'd watched them come out from behind the building where vans park overnight and nobody asks why. He connected the dots. The parking lot, the van, the boys who walked from that direction every single morning. And he waited, because kids like Trent don't just use information, they save it. They hold it until the moment it will cause the most damage. It was a Tuesday in October, lunchtime. The cafeteria at Longfellow was loud the way school cafeterias always are, 100 conversations happening at once, trays sliding, chairs scraping, the low roar of kids being kids in the 1 hour of the day when nobody tells them to be quiet. Brecken and Beckham were sitting at their usual table near the back wall. Free lunch. Turkey and gravy with a sad carton of milk and a fruit cup that was mostly syrup. They ate there every day. Same spot, same meal, same quiet routine of eating without drawing attention. Trent Muller stood up on a bench. Not his bench, the one in the center of the cafeteria, the one near the milk cooler where everyone could see him. He climbed up on it, like he was about to make an announcement. And he did. Beckham and Brecken live in a car. Their mom's a bum. They don't even have a dad. They're car hobos. He said it loud. Loud enough for the tables around him to hear. Loud enough for the words to carry across the room in that specific way that cruel words always carry, faster and farther than kind ones. The laughter didn't come all at once. It started at Trent's table. A few kids who laughed because Trent laughed, and laughing with Trent was safer than not laughing with Trent. Then it spread, not to everyone. Some kids looked away. Some looked confused, like they weren't sure what was funny or whether they were supposed to find it funny. A girl at the next table put her head down. A boy near the window stared at his tray, but enough of them laughed. A critical mass. enough that the sound of it hit Brecon and Beckham like a wave, rolling across the cafeteria and landing on their table and sitting there on top of their turkey and gravy and their sad cartons of milk. Enough laughter to make the armor crack. Enough to make the pressed shirts and the combed hair and the matching socks feel like nothing, like a costume that everyone could see through. Beckham did not cry, did not flinch, did not look up. He looked down at his free lunch, at the turkey and the gravy and the fruit cup, and he kept eating, mechanical, jaw moving steady and slow like he was chewing glass but refusing to stop. Like stopping would mean Trent had won, and Beckham had decided, somewhere in the 3 seconds between the announcement and the laughter, that Trent was not going to win. Not today. Not with this. He picked up his milk carton, took a sip, set it down, picked up his fork, took another bite. Brecon watched his brother eat and understood that this was Beckham's version of the cardboard. The same thing. Absorb the damage. Don't react. Don't let them see what it costs. Keep going. Keep chewing. Keep cutting the cardboard and folding it into the shoe and walking on it until the day is over. Brecon stood up without deciding to. His body made the choice before his brain caught up. The chair scraped back. His hands were fists at his sides. His voice came out shaking, but his fists were steady. You don't know anything about us. The cafeteria got quieter, not silent, but the laughter stopped at the nearby tables. Kids turned to look. Trent was still standing on the bench, arms crossed, grinning the grin of a kid who knows he has an audience and is enjoying it. I know you smell like a car, Trent said. Brecon moved. Not fast, not slow, deliberate. He stepped out from behind the table and walked toward the bench where Trent was standing, and he wanted contact. He wanted to hit something that was not just the unfairness of their life, something with a face and a name, and a mouth that said things it had no right to say. A teacher stepped between them before Brecon reached him. Hands on his shoulders. Firm. That's enough. Both of you. Sit down. Brecon sat down, but his fists stayed closed for the rest of lunch. After the cafeteria incident, at recess, a kid named Jason Mendez found Beckham by the fence near the basketball courts. Jason was quiet. He wore glasses that were too big for his face, and he always had a book in his back pocket, and he had never once laughed at anyone in the cafeteria. He walked up to Beckham and stood next to him for a while without saying anything. Then he said it. You can share my dad sometimes if you want. He said it simply, like he was offering a sandwich or a turn on the swings, no pity in his voice. Just a kid seeing another kid who was missing something and offering to share what he had. Beckham thanked him, smiled, said that was nice. But Brecon was watching from across the yard, and he saw something break behind his brother's eyes. It was small, quick, the kind of thing you'd miss if you weren't looking for it. But Brecon was always looking. Because charity is not the same as belonging. A borrowed father is a reminder that yours is missing. And you can share my dad is the kindest, most devastating sentence a 9-year-old boy can hear, because it confirms the absence while trying to fill it. Beckham never took Jason up on the offer. He never mentioned it again. But Brecon saw the way his brother looked at Jason's dad at pickup for weeks afterward. Watching, measuring, wondering what it felt like to have a hand on your head like it was nothing. That night, parked behind the Food Max, engine off, dome light on low, Brecon told Celine what happened. All of it. Trent, on the bench, the announcement, the laughter, the word hobos, Beckham eating through it like a machine, standing up, the teacher, Jason and his offer. He told her everything because he needed to see what her face would do. He needed to know if she would get angry, if she would cry, if she would finally say something that explained why they were living this way when mothers are supposed to protect their children from exactly this. Solene didn't get angry, didn't cry. She sat in the driver's seat with her keys in the ignition, going nowhere, and stared at the dark parking lot through the windshield. Her hands were in her lap. Her face was still. The performance face, but different this time. Thinner, like the mask was wearing out, and what was underneath was starting to show through. This isn't forever, she said. The words came out quiet. Not a promise exactly, more like something she was telling herself and letting them overhear. Brecken pushed. When does it stop being this? It was the question he'd been carrying since the first night he understood that other kids had beds and they had a bench seat. Since the first time he noticed the way people looked at the van. Since the first time Beckham cut cardboard for his shoe and didn't say a word about it. The question had been building for years, brick by brick, and Trent Muller's announcement in the cafeteria had laid the final one. When does it stop? Selene looked at him through the rearview mirror. Her eyes were dark and still and deep, holding everything and showing nothing. The eyes of a woman who had answers she could not give, and reasons she could not explain, and a secret so heavy it had reshaped her entire life around its weight. She held his gaze in that mirror for a long time. Long enough for the parking lot to go completely quiet outside. Long enough for Beckham to stop pretending to read and look up. When I figure out how to go back without losing you. The sentence landed in the van and stayed there. Brecken didn't understand it. Not the words themselves, those were simple enough. But the meaning underneath them. Go back where? Losing them to whom? What was she talking about? What was she hiding? What was the thing that was so dangerous, so threatening, that she'd chosen a parking lot over whatever going back meant? The sentence lodged itself in his memory like a splinter he couldn't reach. He couldn't pull it out, couldn't ignore it, could only feel it there, pressing against everything else he thought he knew about his mother and his life and the reason they were living the way they were living. He didn't push further. Not that night. He lay down on the bench seat and stared at the ceiling of the van and listened to his mother's breathing slow down in the front seat and wondered what she was going back to and who she was afraid of losing them to. He didn't know yet, but he was about to find out. 2 years passed. The twins turned 10. The van kept moving between the same 3 spots. Selene kept washing clothes at Denny's and standing on the day labor corner and buying cupcakes from the day-old rack. The systems held. The routines continued. Life in the van had a rhythm that felt almost permanent, like this was just how things were and how they would always be. Brecken was 10 now. Beckham was 10. They were taller, sharper, harder to lie to. The adventure story had worn thin. The stars didn't look like a luxury anymore. They looked like what they were. The sky above a parking lot where 2 boys slept in a van because their mother was hiding from something she wouldn't name. Selene was at a day job, cleaning offices on Rosedale Highway. She'd be gone until 6. The boys had let themselves into the van after school, using the spare key Selene kept inside a magnetic box stuck to the underside of the rear bumper. Brecken decided to clean, not because he wanted to, but because the van was getting cluttered, and clutter in a small space makes the small space feel smaller. Beckham helped. They started pulling things out of the back, organizing, sorting, making piles of what to keep and what to throw away. Under the bench seat was the storage bin, the big one, the one Selene kept locked with a combination lock that Brecken had figured out months ago by watching her fingers when she thought he wasn't looking. 4, 7, 2, always the same. He opened it. Everything they owned was in that bin. Everything that mattered anyway. Clothes, folded tight and stacked by person. A first aid kit with a cracked plastic lid. Their birth certificates in a Ziploc bag. School enrollment papers. The WIC documentation. A flashlight with no batteries. A small sewing kit Selene used to repair the thrift store clothes when the seams gave out. And at the bottom, under everything else, a Ziploc bag of cash. Selene called it the absolutely not money. Absolutely not to be touched under any circumstances short of death. Brecken had counted it once when she wasn't looking. $412 in 20s and 10s, and a few 5s. The entire financial safety net of their existence, sealed in a sandwich bag under a pile of documents in a plastic bin in a van. Under the cash. Under everything. At the very bottom of the bin, pressed flat against the plastic, a manila envelope sealed with packing tape. Brecken pulled it out. It was heavier than it looked. The packing tape was wrapped around it twice, the kind of deliberate sealing that says this is not meant to be opened casually. This is meant to stay shut. He looked at Beckham. Beckham looked at the envelope, then at Brecken, then at the van's windows, checking the parking lot out of habit, The same instinct their mother had taught them without ever saying it out loud. Always know who's around. Always check before you do something you can't undo. The parking lot was empty. Celine wouldn't be back for hours. Brecken peeled the tape off slowly, opened the flap, reached inside. His fingers found something small and hard. He pulled it out. A velvet box. Dark blue, almost black. The kind that holds one thing and holds it like a secret. The kind you see in jewelry store windows behind glass. The kind that opens with a soft click and has a hinge that moves like it was designed to make a moment feel important. Brecken opened it. A ring, platinum, a diamond set in the center that caught the dome light and threw scattered points of light across the ceiling of the van like tiny stars. Not a big diamond, not gaudy, but real in a way that Brecken could feel without knowing anything about jewelry. This ring had weight. This ring had cost. This was not a pawn shop ring, not a Walmart ring, not a ring you buy with day labor money or absolutely not cash. This was a ring that meant someone loved the person who wore it with the full weight of their wallet and their heart. A ring from a different life. A life that had nothing to do with parking lots and bench seats and cardboard shoes. Brecken held it up. The light scattered across the ceiling. Beckham stared at it. Neither of them said anything. There were 3 other items in the envelope. The first was a document. Thick paper. Official. A marriage certificate from the state of Connecticut, dated 11 years prior. 2 names printed in that formal font that government documents use to make things feel permanent and legal and beyond argument. Stellan Moreau, married to Solène Cartier. Brecken read the names twice. The first time to make sure he was seeing it correctly. The second time to let it settle. Solène Cartier. Not the name she used. Not the name on the WIC paperwork, or the school enrollment, or the day labor sign-up sheet. A different name. A real name. The name she had before she became whoever she was now. Married. Not divorced. Not separated. Married. Present tense on the certificate. No dissolution. No annulment. Still married. Their mother had a husband. The second item was a photograph. Solène. Younger. Softer. Her face was the same, but everything around it was different. Her hair was done. Her skin looked like it had never missed a meal or a night of sleep. She was wearing a white dress that looked like it cost more than everything they currently owned, and she was standing on a lawn, green and manicured, the kind of lawn that gets watered by a system and cut by someone who gets paid to cut it. Next to her was a man. Tall, angular, dark hair. A jaw that looked like it had been designed rather than grown. He was wearing a suit that fit him the way expensive things fit people who are used to expensive things, perfectly, invisibly, like the clothes had been built around his body rather than bought off a rack. He was looking at her, not at the camera, at her. And the way he was looking at her was the way people look at something they consider theirs completely. Not cruel, not possessive, in an obvious way, but total. The look of a man who believed that the woman beside him was the map, the quest and the destination, and that all of it belonged to him. Brecken stared at the photograph, then looked at Beckham, then back at the photograph, the jaw, the eyes, the brow line. The man in the photograph was looking back at him with his brother's face. The third item was a business card, thick cardstock, embossed lettering, the kind of business card that feels like money before you even read what's on it. Moreau Partners Capital, Stellan Moreau, Managing Director, a New York City address, a phone number. Brecken held the card between his fingers. Managing Director, Capital, New York. These were words from a world he had no access to, a world that existed on the other side of everything he'd ever known. Day labor paid $60 for 8 hours. This business card came from a place where $60 was nothing, where $412 in a Ziploc bag was nothing, where the van and the Food Max and the Denny's bathroom and the Cheerios box cardboard were all nothing. And this man, this managing director from New York, was married to his mother. Brecken sat in the van, holding his mother's secret life in his hands. The ring in its box, the certificate with its 2 names, the photograph with its impossible couple, The business card with its impossible address. The world tilted. Not dramatically. Not like an earthquake or a movie moment. It tilted the way the ground tilts when you step off a curb you didn't see. A small shift that changes everything about where you thought you were standing. He looked at the ring, then at Beckham's backpack hanging on the hook by the sliding door. Then he reconstructed his brother's face in his mind. The jaw, the eyes, the unmistakable, undeniable mirror image of the man in the photograph. The realization landed. Their mother was married to a wealthy man. A man in New York. A man with a business card and a suit and a jaw that his son inherited. And they were sleeping in a van in Bakersfield, eating canned soup and cutting cardboard for their shoes and washing clothes in a Denny's bathroom at midnight. Not because she had no choice. Because she made one. Brecken put everything back, carefully. The business card first, then the photograph, face down, the way he found it. The marriage certificate, folded along its original creases. The ring, closed in its velvet box with a soft click. He slid them all into the manila envelope, pressed the packing tape back down, running his thumb along the edges to make sure it held. It wouldn't look exactly the same. The tape was wrinkled now where it had been peeled, but it was close enough. Close enough to pass unless Solène was looking for signs of entry. And Brecken wasn't sure whether she did that or not. He slid the envelope back under the bin, under the cash, under the documents and the first aid kit and the folded clothes. Back to the very bottom where his mother had put it. Back to the dark. He sat on the bench seat, hands in his lap, staring at the spot on the floor where the bin sat, knowing what was underneath it, feeling the weight of it, even though it was no longer in his hands. He said nothing, not to Beckham, not to Celine when she came back from work that evening, smelling like cleaning solution and looking like she'd been standing for 9 hours because she had, not to anyone. He said nothing because he was 10 and afraid, and because he understood, with the terrible clarity that children who grow up in unstable circumstances develop like a sixth sense, that this knowledge was a grenade. It was live. It was dangerous. And he was not ready to decide who it should be thrown at. If he told Celine he'd found it, she would know her secret was exposed. She would panic. She might move them again, somewhere farther, somewhere new. And the thin stability they'd built in Bakersfield, the school, the library, the parking spots, Phuong, the routines, would be gone. If he told Beckham, really told him, explained the certificate and the name and the photograph and what it all meant, he'd be handing the grenade to his brother. And Beckham was the boy who ate through cafeteria humiliation without flinching and cut cardboard every morning without complaining. Beckham was already carrying enough. So Brecken carried it alone. He carried it for 2 years, from 8 to 10, 730 days of knowing that the life they were living was a choice and not a sentence. 730 days of watching his mother scrub shirts in a Denny's bathroom, while knowing that somewhere, in a different state, in a different world, there was a man with a platinum ring and a business card and a jaw like Beckham's who was married to her. He carried it the way Beckham carried cardboard in his shoe, hidden, functional, slowly disintegrating. He carried it to school and back. He carried it to the library on Saturdays. He carried it through 2 birthdays on the hood of the van, with day-old cupcakes and stolen candles, and his mother singing off-key. He carried it, and it changed him. It made him quieter, more watchful. He started reading his mother differently, looking for the seams in her performance, the places where the woman in the photograph leaked through the woman in the van. And he found them. Small moments, the way she held a book, the way she commented on sentence structure, the way she sometimes stared at the sky with a look that wasn't wonder but memory. The grenade got heavier every day, but he held on to it, because the alternative was letting go, and letting go meant an explosion he couldn't control. 3 months before everything broke open, they were parked behind the Rite Aid on Chester Avenue. It was 2 in the morning. The lot was empty, except for the van and the overhead lights that hummed that particular frequency that Brecken associated with every parking lot they'd ever slept in. A knock on the window, flashlight beams sweeping through the glass. Security guard, young, nervous. The beam found Brecken's face first, then Beckham's, then Celine sitting up in the driver's seat, blinking. "Are those kids? Ma'am, are there children in this vehicle?" The word children came out of his mouth like evidence, like he was documenting it for a report he was already writing in his head. Not concern. Procedure. Celine's voice went calm. The performance calm. The calm that was not calm, but was holding calm in place. "They're my sons. We're fine. We're just passing through." The guard looked at the back seat, at the blankets and the pillows and the storage bin and the books and the flashlights and everything that said, "This is not passing through, this is living here. You can't stay here, Mum. I know. We're leaving." She started the engine, pulled out of the Rite Aid lot, drove across town to the Walmart on Gosford, parked, turned off the engine. Her knuckles were white on the steering wheel, and they stayed white. Beckham spoke from the back seat. His voice was soft in the dark. "Mom, it's okay. We're okay." Celine didn't turn around. "I know, baby." "Then why are you crying?" She wasn't crying. Her face was dry, but Beckham could feel it. Something had broken loose inside her, and he could feel it the way you feel the air change before weather moves in. Something structural, something that had been holding her together, load-bearing, the stubbornness, the systems, the routines, the performance, and it had cracked, not all the way, but enough for her children to sense it from the back seat. She sat there gripping the steering wheel in a dark Walmart parking lot, and she was not crying, but she was coming apart in a way that was worse than crying. Crying has a sound. This was silent. She turned around, looked at both of them. The dome light was off, but there was enough glow from the Walmart sign outside to see her face. It was serious in a way that went beyond the security guard and the Rite Aid lot and the 2 in the morning relocation. "If something happens," she said, "if I can't take care of you anymore, I need you to know something." She paused, breathed. "Everything I did was to protect you. Even the things that don't make sense, especially those." The words sat in the van. Heavy, final, the kind of sentence people say when they're preparing for something, when they need to get the important thing said before the window closes. Brecken felt the grenade pulse in his chest. The ring, the certificate, the photograph, the name. Stellan Moreau, married, managing director, New York. "Protect us from what?" Brecken asked. Solène looked at him, not through the rearview mirror this time, directly. She turned in her seat and looked at her son's face, and Brecken swears to this day that she knew. Something in his face told her, some flicker, some micro-expression that a mother who has spent a decade reading her children's bodies and moods and silences could not miss. The way he asked the question, not confused, not scared, knowing. Asking not because he didn't know the answer, but because he needed her to say it. She saw it. He's certain she saw it. She didn't answer. She turned back around, reclined the seat, closed her eyes. The conversation was over, but something had shifted between them. A new kind of silence. Not the protective silence of a mother keeping secrets, not the patient silence of a boy waiting to understand. This silence had 2 people on either side of it who both knew the same thing and were both choosing not to say it. Brecken lay in the dark, listened to Beckham's breathing slow and deepen into sleep, thought about the ring, the certificate, the photograph, the face that was their face, the business card with the New York address. He thought about what could be so dangerous about a father that their mother chose a parking lot over a home. And then, 2 months later, he heard her say his name. 2 months after the Rite Aid incident, after the security guard's flashlight and the midnight drive to Walmart on Gosford and Solene's knuckles going white on the steering wheel and staying white, Brecken came home from school and found her mother on the phone. This was unusual. Solène had a prepaid flip phone, grey, scratched, the kind you buy at a gas station for $20 and load with minutes you count like coins. She used it for 2 things: day labor callbacks and the occasional call to Phuong, a Vietnamese woman who worked at the Denny's on White Lane and had become the closest thing Solène had to a friend in Bakersfield. That was it. Those were the only calls. The phone sat in the center console most days like a dead thing, and Brecken had never once seen her mother hold it to her ear with both hands. But today she was holding it with both hands. Brecken heard her mother's voice before she saw her face. She was walking up from the bus stop on Brundage, backpack over one shoulder, and the van was parked in its usual spot behind Food Max, and through the cracked driver's side window she could hear Solane talking. Not loud, not arguing. Quiet. The kind of quiet that isn't calm. The kind that is holding calm in place with both hands and pressing down hard. Solene's back was to the window. Her shoulders were up near her ears. Her left hand gripped the steering wheel, even though the van wasn't running. Her right hand held the phone so tight Brecken could see the tendons in her wrist from 15 feet away. Something about the posture stopped Brecken in the parking lot. She didn't call out, didn't knock on the glass. She stood there with her backpack strap cutting into her shoulder and listened. Point 3, fragments Brecken overhears. She couldn't hear everything, just pieces. Sentences that came through the cracked window like signal through static. I told you. That's not going to happen. A pause, long enough for whoever was on the other end to say something that made Solane close her eyes. Because you don't get to decide that. You decided enough. Another pause. Longer this time. Solane's knuckles went white on the steering wheel. The same white they'd been the night she drove them away from Rite Aid. The same white that meant something inside her was under pressure and she was choosing not to let it out. Then her jaw tightened and she leaned forward slightly, like she was trying to push the words through the phone with her body. Point 4, the name. Stellan, I swear to God. Stellan, I swear to God. She stopped, not because she ran out of words, because she saw Brecken. Their eyes met through the side mirror. Brecken was standing in the parking lot, 10 feet from the van, backpack hanging off one shoulder, mouth slightly open, and she knew, she absolutely knew, that the name she had just heard was the same name on the marriage certificate in the manila envelope under the bench seat. Solane hung up, didn't say goodbye, didn't finish the sentence, just closed the phone and set it in the console and sat there for a moment with her hands in her lap like she was deciding what version of the next 30 seconds to perform. The name sat between them like a lit match near gasoline. Brecken opened the sliding door, climbed in, set her backpack on the bench seat. She could feel her pulse in her fingertips. Who's Stellan? She already knew the answer. She'd known for 2 years. But she needed to hear the lie, needed to measure it against everything else her mother had told her, every beautiful lie about adventures and stars and being fancy, to see if this one would sound the same, or if it would sound like what it was. Solane turned around. Her face was flat, controlled, the performance face. Nobody, you said his name, Brecken. Nobody, the word sat there, nobody. 2 syllables that were supposed to close the door. And they did, for now. Brecken wanted to scream. She wanted to climb over the seat and pull the storage bin out from under the bench and rip the packing tape off the manila envelope and throw it in her mother's lap. She wanted to say, I found it. All of it. The ring, the certificate, the photograph, the business card. I know you're married. I know his name is Stellan Moreau. I know he's in New York. I know he's our father. I know his jaw is Beckham's jaw, and his eyes are my eyes, and you have been hiding us from him for our entire lives, and I need to know why. She wanted to say all of that. Every word was loaded and ready and sitting in the back of her throat like something physical. But she didn't, because she looked at her mother's eyes, really looked, and she saw something she had never seen there before. Not fear. Brecken knew what fear looked like on Solane. Fear was the Rite Aid parking lot. Fear was the security guard's flashlight. Fear was the middle-of-the-night engine start, and the calm voice saying, it's fine, we're just going somewhere new. Not worry. Worry was the coin counting at the laundromat. Worry was the way she checked the gas gauge 3 times before deciding whether to run the heat. Worry was manageable. Worry had a face Brecken recognized. This was neither of those. This was terror. The kind that lives in your bones. The kind that has a name and an address, and a phone number on a business card in a manila envelope taped shut and hidden under a bench seat. The kind that doesn't go away when the security guard leaves or the money comes in. The kind that is always there, running underneath everything like water under pavement, and the only thing keeping it from surfacing is the sheer force of a woman's will. Brecken swallowed the question, climbed to her spot in the back, opened her homework by dome light, and said nothing. 6 weeks passed. The phone call was never mentioned again. Celine went back to day labor and WIC vouchers and Wednesday laundry at Denny's, and the whole machinery of survival that kept them fed and clothed and together. Brecken went back to school. Beckham went back to cutting cardboard for his shoe. Then Fwong called. It was a Thursday afternoon. Celine picked up the phone on the first ring, which she never did, listened for less than a minute, and told the twins they were driving to Denny's. Why? Beckham asked. Because I said so. That was enough for Beckham. He put on his shoes, but Brecken watched her mother's hands on the steering wheel and noticed they were doing the thing again. The white knuckle thing. The thing that meant the water under the pavement was rising. They parked at Denny's. Celine told them to wait in the van. She went inside. The twins sat in the back seat and watched through the window. Fwong was standing by a booth near the back. She had something in her hand, a thick envelope, not a bill, not junk mail, the kind of envelope that comes from a law office or a government agency, the kind with weight to it, the kind that means someone spent money to find you. Selena took it, stood there, holding it for a moment, like she was weighing it. Then she opened it. Brecken watched through the window as her mother pulled out a stack of papers, unfolded them, and began reading. She watched Celine's face change, not dramatically, not like in a movie. It was small, the way her lips pressed together, the way her shoulders dropped an inch, the way she sat down in the booth like her legs had simply decided they were done. Fwong brought a glass of water. Celine didn't touch it. She just sat there, papers in her lap, staring at something Brecken couldn't see from the parking lot, staring at whatever those words said, whatever truth had finally arrived in writing. She came back to the van, holding the envelope against her chest. Not at her side, against her chest, the way you hold something that could either save you or end you, and you haven't decided which yet. She opened the driver's door, sat down, didn't start the engine. She adjusted the rearview mirror and looked at the twins through it. Both of them, one at a time. The way she looked at them on their birthdays, when she'd hold a cupcake with a crooked candle and stare at their faces like she was memorizing them in case the memory was all she'd have someday. Then she said it. We need to talk, both of you, about your father. Beckham's head snapped up. He'd been looking at his hands, picking at a callus on his thumb, the kind you get from gripping a pencil too hard for too many hours, and when Celine said the word father, his whole body went still. You said we didn't have one. His voice was quiet, not angry, hurt, the kind of hurt that comes from realizing that a thing you accepted, a thing you built your understanding of the world around, was never true. He'd spent years telling himself the story his mother gave him. You have me. I'm enough. There is no father. There is only us. And he'd believed it, not because it made sense, but because she said it, and her word was the only solid ground he had. Now that ground was moving. Celine's voice cracked, not on the first word or the second. On the last one. I said you had me. And you do. You always will. But... She stopped. The word but hung in the air inside that van like something suspended, something waiting to fall. Brecken could feel it. Beckham could feel it. Even the van itself seemed to hold still, the engine off, the parking lot quiet, the Denny's sign buzzing faintly in the background. But meant everything that came before was about to be rewritten. But meant the adventure was never an adventure. But meant the stars they slept under weren't a choice. But meant there was more, and the more was the thing Celine had been running from since before the twins could remember. But what? Brecken said it from the back seat. Her voice was steady, but her hands were not. She was gripping the edge of the bench seat, fingers digging into the vinyl, because she already knew. She'd known for 2 years. She'd known since the ring and the certificate and the photograph of a man with their jaw and their eyes. She'd known since she heard the name through a cracked window in this same parking lot. She'd known, and she'd carried it, and now she needed her mother to say it out loud so she could finally set it down. Selene looked at the envelope in her hands, then back at her children, back and forth, the papers and the faces, the truth and the people it would hit. 3 words. He found us. The van got quiet the way it got quiet on that Tuesday night when Brecken first asked why they didn't have a dad. The same silence, the same weight, but different now, because now the silence had a shape. It had a name, Stellan, and it had a direction. He was coming, or he was already here, or he had sent the envelope as a warning or an offering, or both. Brecken felt her heartbeat in her throat. Beckham reached across the seat and found her hand. She held it. They sat there, brother and sister, 10 years old, in the back of a van behind a Denny's in Bakersfield, holding hands and staring at their mother and understanding for the first time that the life they had been living was not a life. It was a hiding place. And the person they'd been hiding from had just walked through the door. Right now, you're feeling what Brecken and Beckham felt in that van. That collision between wanting to know and being terrified to find out. So let me ask you this. If you were sitting in that back seat, if the mother you trusted with your life just told you the father you never knew existed had found you, what would you do? Would you trust her? Or would you need to see him for yourself? Drop your answer in the comments. I want to hear this. This is why this story exists. Because these moments, these impossible crossroads, they deserve to be heard. And if you're not subscribed yet, now is the time. Because what happens next in this parking lot is something you will not see coming. Because Brecken and Beckham did not get time to decide. The decision arrived in a black SUV. The SUV was black. Clean. The kind of clean that means someone washes it every day. Not because it's dirty, but because that's what you do when things cost what that car cost. It pulled into the Denny's parking lot slow, like the driver knew exactly where he was going and was in no hurry to get there. Selene knew the car before it stopped. Brecken could tell by the way her hand moved. Not to the children, not to the ignition, to the rearview mirror, like she needed to see her own face before she could face his. Like she needed one last second with the version of herself that existed before this moment, and whatever version would come after it. She adjusted the mirror, looked at herself, looked at the SUV, then put her hands back on the steering wheel and gripped it, even though the engine wasn't running. "Stay in the van," she said. Her voice was calm, but her breathing wasn't. The driver's door opened. A man stepped out. He was taller than the photograph suggested. Or maybe the photograph had been small, and Brecken had filled in the details wrong in her mind over 2 years of imagining. He was older now. His hair was darker at the roots and grey at the temples. His face was leaner. He wore a coat that looked like it cost more than every piece of clothing the 3 of them owned combined, and he stood beside the SUV with his hands still on the open door, like he wasn't sure he was allowed to close it. But it was his face that stopped Brecken's breath. Their jaw, their eyes, the same brow line that Beckham saw in the mirror every morning. The same set of the mouth that Brecken caught in her own reflection when she was angry or concentrating or trying not to cry. He was not a stranger. He was a map back to themselves. He looked at the van. The 2007 Chrysler, with its chalky grey paint and its stuck sliding door and its dashboard stained from 4 years of wet laundry. He looked at it the way you look at something that confirms every fear you've had for a decade. His mouth opened slightly. His hand came off the car door and dropped to his side. Brecken watched him take in the mesh window screens held on with binder clips. The dome light that ran off a dying battery. The storage bin visible through the back window where everything they owned was packed into a space smaller than most closets. He was looking at the place where his children had been living. And whatever he had imagined during 10 years of searching, whatever scenario he had built in his mind about where they were, and how they were, this was worse. You could see it on his face. This was worse than anything he had prepared for. He did not move toward them. Selene did not move away. 30 feet of parking lot asphalt between the SUV and the van. 30 feet and 10 years and a secret and a custody threat and a ring sealed in a velvet box and a woman who chose a parking lot over a penthouse because the penthouse came with a price she refused to pay. 30 feet. You could cross it in 10 seconds at a walk. But that distance held everything. Every decision, every sacrifice. Every night of canned soup and dome light reading and Dollar Tree candles on day-old cupcakes. Every lie Solène told to make the van feel like a home. Every truth she buried to keep her children close. Neither of them moved. The parking lot held its breath. In the back seat, Beckham reached across and found Brecken's hand. He didn't look at her when he did it. His eyes were on the man standing next to the SUV, the man with their face. The man their mother had called nobody, and whose name she'd said like a curse through a cracked window 6 weeks ago. Brecken held her brother's hand. His palm was damp. Hers was cold. They sat there side by side on the bench seat where they'd slept and read and eaten and done homework for years, and they watched through the windshield as the two halves of their origin story stood in a parking lot and refused to close the gap. Solène whispered something. Not to the twins. Not to the man. To nobody. He wasn't supposed to come. She opened the driver's door, stepped out, closed it behind her with a careful click, not a slam, because slamming would mean she'd lost control, and Solène never lost control where the twins could see. Stay inside, both of you. She locked the doors from outside using the key fob. The click of the locks was loud in the quiet lot. Brecken heard it and understood. Her mother wasn't locking them in for safety. She was locking them away from the conversation that was about to happen. Away from whatever truths were about to be said in that 30-foot stretch of asphalt between two people who had once shared a last name and a bed and 2 children and a life that was nothing like a van behind a Denny's. Solène walked towards Stellan. Her steps were measured. Even, the walk of a woman approaching something dangerous on her own terms. Brecken pressed her forehead against the windshield and watched. She couldn't hear the words. The glass turned everything into muffle and hum. Vowels without consonants, tone without content. But she could read bodies. She'd spent her entire life reading her mother's body. The shoulders, the hands, the angle of her chin. She knew what every position meant the way other kids knew the alphabet. Solène's posture was a wall, arms crossed tight against her chest. Chin up, feet planted shoulder-width apart, rooted to the asphalt like she'd grown there. Everything about her said the same thing. You don't get to be here. You don't get to see this. You don't get to walk back into the thing I spent a decade protecting. Stellan's posture was different. His arms were at his sides. His palms faced slightly outward, not raised, just open, the way people stand when they're trying to show they're unarmed. His head was tilted forward, just a degree, leaning into the conversation, leaning toward her. The body language of a man who knows he is not welcome but has decided he will not leave. It started quiet. Brecken could tell by the stillness of their shoulders, the small movements of their mouths. They were talking the way adults talk when they know children are watching. Controlled, careful. Then it changed. Solène's arms dropped from her chest. Her right hand came up and her finger extended and she started pointing. Not at him exactly, but at the air between them, jabbing it, punctuating whatever she was saying with sharp downward strokes. Her body tipped forward. Her chin dropped from up to out, which meant she had gone from defensive to offensive, from wall to weapon. Stellan took a half step back, then held. He didn't retreat. He absorbed it. His hands stayed open. His mouth moved in shorter bursts now, responses rather than statements, the cadence of a man who was being told things and accepting them rather than fighting back. This went on for 2 or 3 minutes. Solène's pointing got sharper. Her body got closer to his. Whatever she was saying, it was coming from deep, from the years. From every parking lot and every security guard, and every night she washed clothes in a Denny's bathroom, and every morning she watched her son cut cardboard for his shoe. She was giving him all of it. Through glass, without sound, Brecken could see 10 years of swallowed rage finally finding a target. Then he said something. Brecken couldn't hear it. She only saw the effect. Solène stopped moving. Her hand dropped. She took a full step backward, not a half step, a full one, her heel catching on a crack in the asphalt. Whatever he said landed somewhere she couldn't guard. Some truth or accusation or question that bypassed the wall and hit whatever was behind it. Her mouth opened and closed without making a sound. Her arms came back to her chest, but looser now, not crossed, more like she was holding herself. She stood there for a long moment. Brecken saw her mother's chest rise and fall, the deep breathing of someone trying to stay upright when something inside them has just shifted. Stellan didn't press it. He stood where he was, hands still open. He looked like a man who had just said the most honest thing he'd ever said and was waiting to see whether it would build a bridge or burn one. Brecken couldn't take it anymore. She reached across the bench seat and found the lock mechanism. The child lock was on, but the door had a manual override if you pulled the handle and pushed the latch at the same time, something she'd figured out 2 years ago when she was looking for ways out of the van during a heat wave. She pulled, pushed. The door clicked. She slid it open. The sound made both parents turn. Solene's face went white, not figuratively, actually white. The blood left her cheeks and her lips pressed together, and she took a step toward the van and said, "Brecken, get back inside." But her voice had no power in it. The power was gone. It had left with whatever Stellan said 30 seconds ago. Brecken stepped onto the asphalt. Her shoes were untied. Her backpack was still in the van. She was 10 years old and small for her age, and standing in a Denny's parking lot in Bakersfield, California, and she opened her mouth and broke 2 years of silence with a sentence that detonated everything. "I found the ring. I found the certificate. I know who he is. And I need someone to tell me the truth right now." Both of them turned to face her at the same time. Like her voice was a sound they were both tuned to, a frequency that cut through whatever they'd been saying to each other and rerouted everything toward her. The look on Solene's face was something Brecken had never seen before, and has never seen since. It was the look of a woman watching the one thing she'd spent a decade protecting come apart in front of her. Not the secret. The secret was already out. It was the control, the ability to choose when and how and in what order the truth arrived. That was gone. Her 10-year-old daughter had taken it from her in one sentence, standing in a parking lot in untied shoes, and there was nothing she could do to get it back. The look on Stellan's face was different. He wasn't watching a plan fail. He was seeing something he had spent 10 years trying to find. His daughter, standing in front of him, alive, angry, real, with his eyes, and her mother's spine, and a voice that shook but did not stop. He looked at her the way people look at things they've lost and found, and can't quite believe are real again. Behind Brecken, the van shifted. The bench seat creaked. Beckham appeared in the open doorway, one hand on the frame, his other hand at his side. He didn't say anything. He didn't need to. He stepped down onto the asphalt and stood next to his sister, shoulder to shoulder, and his presence said everything his mouth didn't. He was quieter than Brecken. Always had been. He processed things internally, slowly, building understanding the way you build a structure, one piece at a time, testing each one before adding the next. But he was here, standing beside her, and Brecken felt his arm brush against hers and knew that whatever happened next, they were doing it together. 2 10-year-olds in a parking lot, facing the 2 people who made them and broke them and hid them and found them. Stellan looked at them. First Brecken, then Beckham, back to Brecken. His mouth moved before his voice caught up, like the words had been sitting in him for so long they'd almost forgotten how to come out. Brecken. Beckham. That was it. Just their names. 2 words. But hearing their names in his voice was a sound they had never heard before. They'd heard their names from their mother, from teachers, from Phuong, from other kids, from librarians and security guards and day labor bosses, but never from him. Never from the voice that was supposed to say their names first, in a hospital, with joy, with trembling hands and new father tears, and the overwhelmed stammer of a man meeting his children for the first time. He was 10 years late, and the names came out carrying all of that lateness, all of that weight, all of that absence. Brecken felt something shift inside her chest. Not a crack, not a break, more like a door opening into a room she didn't know existed. A room that had been empty her whole life without her realizing it, and now his voice was in it, filling it, and she didn't know whether to let it stay or slam it shut. She didn't slam it shut. She pushed forward. Why did we live in a van? The question came out hard, harder than she meant. But she was 10 years old, and standing in front of the man, who was apparently her father, while her mother stood 5 feet away, looking like she might collapse. And she was done being patient. Done carrying the ring and the certificate and the silence. Done with nobody, and this is an adventure. And some people pay good money to sleep under stars like these. Why did she hide us from you? What did you do? What's so dangerous about you that she picked this? Brecken pointed at the van, at the chalky paint and the binder clip, screens and the bench seat where she'd slept for as long as she could remember, over whatever you were offering. She looked at Solane, then at Stellan, then back. Someone tell me, right now, because I've been carrying this for 2 years and I'm done. Solane spoke first, not because she wanted to, because she had to, because the alternative was letting Stellan tell it, and she would not give him that power. Not yet. Not ever, if she could help it. She didn't look at Stellan when she talked. She looked at her children. She looked at them, the way she looked at them when she sang on the hood of the van, like they were the only real things in the world. Your father, she said, and the word father came out of her mouth like something she'd been holding, underwater for a decade and had finally let float to the surface, is not a violent man. He never hit me. He never touched me in anger, not once. She paused. But there are other ways to make someone disappear. She told them what he was, not in one long speech, in pieces, sentences that came out with gaps between them, like she was testing each one to see if it could hold the weight of being said out loud. He was controlling, not the kind you could point to and name easily, not the kind that leaves bruises or raises voices, the kind that operates through systems, through money, through access, through the quiet, constant rearrangement of your life, until the walls are so close you can't tell whether you're being held or being contained. When they were married, Solane said, every decision went through Stellan, not because he demanded it loudly, but because the infrastructure of their life made it so. The bank accounts were in his name, the house was in his name, the cars, the insurance, the memberships, all of it routed through him or through his family's office. She had a credit card that he could see every transaction on. She had a phone plan that he paid for. She had a life that looked, from the outside, like luxury, but felt, from the inside, like a room with no doors. I didn't know what it was, she said. Not at first. At first I thought that's just how it works when someone has that kind of money. I thought I was being ungrateful. When the twins were born, things got worse, not louder, tighter. Solane wanted to raise them herself. She wanted to feed them and dress them and make the small daily decisions that mothers make, the ones that seem ordinary, but are actually how you build a relationship with your children. What they eat, when they sleep, which park you go to, whether you let them get dirty or make them stay clean. But by the time Brecken and Beckham were 3 months old, Stellan had already hired 2 nannies, a daytime nanny and a night nanny. He'd enrolled them in an infant development program at a private school in Greenwich. He'd arranged a schedule for their days that was printed on cardstock and posted on the refrigerator, and left no room for the kind of unstructured, instinctive mothering that Solane believed in. She pushed back. She said she didn't want the night nanny. She said she wanted to be the one who got up at 2 in the morning and held them. Stellan listened, nodded, and the night nanny showed up the following Monday as scheduled. She pushed back harder. She said she wanted to stay home with them full-time, skip the infant program, just be their mother for a while. Stellan said he understood. And then his assistant sent an email with the updated enrollment confirmation. Every push was absorbed. Every objection was heard and ignored. And Solane started to understand that the room she was living in didn't just have no doors. It had no windows either. When she told Stellan she wanted to separate, to take the children, and figure out her own life away from the structure he'd built around her, the response did not come from him. It came from his attorneys. A letter, thick, on firm letterhead. It outlined, in language that was polite and precise and absolutely merciless, the terms of a potential custody evaluation. It listed his resources, his connections, his stable home environment, his staff, his capacity to provide. It listed her lack of independent income, her lack of property in her own name, her lack of a verifiable employment history during the marriage. It did not say she was a bad mother. It didn't need to. It said everything else. It said that in a system where custody is determined by resources and stability, she would be reduced to supervised visits at best. At worst, she would be erased entirely from her children's daily lives. A footnote in a file, a name on a holiday schedule. I read that letter 6 times, Soline told them, and I understood what it meant. It meant that if I played by the rules, I would lose you. Not because I was unfit, because the rules were written by people with money, and the man I married had more of it than I could ever fight against. She didn't run from Stellan. She ran from what was behind him. The legal machinery, the family money, the network of attorneys and judges and evaluators and experts who could be hired to prove whatever needed proving. She ran from a system designed to protect wealth, not children, and she ran because she believed, with every cell in her body, that staying meant losing them. She chose poverty. She chose presence. She chose the van and the parking lots, and the food max on Brundage Lane, and the cardboard in Beckham's shoe, and the Dollar Tree candles, and the Denny's bathroom laundry, and every single ugly, exhausting, humiliating piece of the life they'd been living. Because the alternative was a beautiful house, where she would have been a visitor in her own children's lives. She chose to be there, every morning, every night, every birthday with a day-old cupcake, and a crooked candle, and a song sung off-key. "I chose you," she said, and her voice was steady when she said it. Steady in a way it hadn't been since the SUV pulled into the lot. Beckham had been quiet. Through all of it, through the custody letter explanation, and the night nanny, and the attorney's letterhead, and the choice between poverty and presence. He'd stood there on the asphalt next to his sister, listening, absorbing, building the structure of understanding one piece at a time. Then he spoke. "Did you ever think about what we wanted?" The question was quiet, almost gentle, which made it worse. If he'd shouted it, Soline could have matched his volume, could have met anger with explanation. But he didn't shout. He asked it like he genuinely wanted to know, like he'd been carrying the weight of the cardboard, and the wet socks, and the dome light, and the security guards, and the parking lots. And he needed to know whether any of it had been necessary. Soline opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. Nothing came out. Because the answer was no. She hadn't asked them. She couldn't have. They were infants when she left. They were babies strapped into car seats in the back of a van driving through the night, and she made the decision for them because that's what mothers do. But now, they were 10, and they were standing in front of her with their father 30 feet away, and their whole lives reorganized by a choice they had no say in. Her silence was louder than anything she had ever said. Stellan stepped forward. One step. Just one. His hands were still at his sides, still slightly open, and his voice came out rough, like he hadn't used it for the important things in a long time and wasn't sure it still worked. "I'd like to talk to them, just for a few minutes. Please." The please sat in the air. It was not a power word. It was not the word of a man worth billions giving an order dressed as a request. It was the word of a father standing in a parking lot asking for 5 minutes with the children he hadn't seen in a decade. And it sounded, to Brecken, like the truest thing he'd said since he stepped out of the SUV. No, Soline's refusal was instant. Not hesitant, not measured. Instant. The word came out of her like a reflex, like touching a hot surface, and her body moved with it. She stepped to the side, placing herself between Stellan and the twins. Her back to her children, her face to his. "No, you do not get to drive here in that car, to this parking lot, and ask to talk to them like you're picking up where you left off. You left off with a letter from your lawyers that told me I'd never see them again. That's where you left off. You don't get to skip forward." Her voice was shaking now, not from weakness, from the effort of holding back everything she wanted to say and only letting out what she'd chosen. Beckham spoke again. Quietly, the same gentle tone. the one that cut deeper than any shout. "Mom, we deserve to hear him." 7 words. From a 10-year-old boy with cardboard in his shoe and his father's jaw and his mother's stubbornness and a patience that came from years of learning what questions cost and deciding to ask anyway. Solène turned to look at him. Her mouth opened. Nothing came out. She looked at Brecken. Brecken's face said the same thing Beckham's voice had said. We deserve to hear him. She stood there, in the middle, between the man she'd run from and the children she'd run for. And for the first time in 10 years, she was not the one making the decision. Nobody spoke. The parking lot was still. The Denny's sign buzzed. A car passed on the street beyond the lot, its headlights sweeping across the asphalt and then gone. Somewhere, a dog barked twice and stopped. Solène stood with her back to Stellan and her face to her children, and she didn't move, didn't nod, didn't shake her head. She just stood there, breathing. And Brecken watched her mother's chest rise and fall, and understood that this was the loudest silence she had ever heard, because it wasn't empty. It was full. Full of 10 years and a van and a ring and a certificate and a photograph, and a name whispered through a cracked window, and a word, nobody, that had held the whole lie together until a 10-year-old girl in untied shoes pulled it out from under everything. The silence held. It held and held and held. And then it broke. Solène stepped aside. She didn't say yes. She didn't give permission with words. She just moved. 1 step to the left. Enough to open a line between Stellan and the twins. Enough to say what her mouth couldn't. Stellan walked forward, slowly, like the asphalt between them was sacred ground, and he knew he hadn't earned the right to stand on it. He stopped about 6 feet from the twins, close enough to talk, far enough that Solène wouldn't pull them back. He didn't speak like a man worth $2 billion. He didn't speak like a managing director or a man who'd once sent a custody letter through a team of attorneys. He spoke like someone broken and trying to explain the break. "I'm not going to stand here and tell you I was a good husband," he said. "I wasn't." He didn't soften it, didn't frame it, didn't say, "But you have to understand," or "there were reasons," or any of the things people say when they want credit for honesty without actually being honest. The lawyers were my idea. The custody letter was my idea. I told them to write it in a way that would make her understand she couldn't win. I told them to make it clear. And they did. He paused, looked at the ground, then back up. I told myself I was protecting you, that I was the one who could give you the better life, the education, the stability, the things that money can provide and that a courtroom can measure. His jaw tightened. I was wrong. I was controlling your mother and calling it fatherhood. And the worst part is I believed it. I genuinely believed that what I was doing was right. He told them about the after, not the details of the search, not the private investigators and the legal filings and the databases and the tips that led nowhere. He told them about what it felt like to be the man left behind in the house that was supposed to hold everything. The night she left, I came home to a house full of staff and silence. The nannies were there. The security was there. The schedule was on the refrigerator. Everything was in place. Everything was exactly where I'd put it. And you were gone. He swallowed. I sat in the nursery. 2 cribs, 2 mobiles, 2 of everything, and nobody in any of it. And I understood for the first time that I had built a machine and called it a family, and the family had left because the machine was all there was. He told them the search went on for years, that it consumed him in a way that nothing else ever had, that the man who once controlled every detail of his life couldn't control the one thing that mattered, which was finding the people he'd driven away. I had everything, he said. Staff, resources, the best people money could hire. And I couldn't find you, because your mother is smarter than all of them. He glanced at Solène when he said it. She didn't look back. Point 4. He doesn't ask for forgiveness. He asks for a beginning. He looked at the twins again. I'm not asking you to forgive me. I don't think forgiveness is mine to ask for. I think that's something you give when you're ready, if you're ever ready, and nobody gets to rush you. He put his hands in his pockets, took them out again, like he didn't know what to do with them, like the man who ran a capital firm and directed rooms full of people couldn't figure out where to put his hands in front of his own children. I'm asking for a beginning, a small one. I'm asking for the chance to be someone you know, not someone you were hidden from. That's it. That's all I'm asking. He told them he'd spent years in therapy. Not the kind that wealthy people do as a lifestyle accessory. The kind that tears you open on a Tuesday morning and sends you home wondering who you are. I had to learn something that most people understand by the time they're 20, he said. That love and control are not the same thing. That wanting the best for someone and deciding what the best is without asking them are not the same thing. That building a life around people is not the same as building a life for them. He didn't claim to be fixed. He said that word specifically. I'm not fixed. I don't think people get fixed. I think they get aware, and I'm aware now, of what I did, of who I was, of why she left. Brecken noted that, the honesty of, I'm not fixed, because people who claim to be fixed usually aren't. People who claim to be trying usually are. And the difference between those two things is the difference between performance and progress. Selene stood to the side through all of it. Arms at her sides now, not crossed. Her face was doing something Brecken had never seen it do. It was fighting itself. 10 years of rage pulling in one direction. Something else, something she wasn't ready to name, pulling in the other. She didn't interrupt him, not once. She let him talk. Let him say the things she'd probably imagined him saying in 100 different versions over a decade of parking lots and prepaid phones and midnight relocations. And now he was saying them. In this parking lot, in front of their children. And they sounded different than she'd expected. You could see it in the way her weight shifted from one foot to the other. In the way her mouth moved slightly without producing sound, like she was editing responses in real time and choosing to say none of them. She did not forgive him. Not in this moment, not in this parking lot. But she did something harder than forgiving. She let go. She turned to the twins. Her eyes were wet, but nothing fell. She looked at them the way she'd looked at them through the rearview mirror when she said he found us, like she was memorizing them, like she was about to hand them something fragile and was afraid of what they'd do with it. I have spent 10 years deciding everything for you, she said. Where we sleep, what we eat, who we see, who we don't see. I told myself it was protection, and a lot of it was, but some of it was control, and I promised myself I would never be the thing I ran from. She paused, breathed. Maybe it's time I let you decide something for yourselves. Even this. Brecken stood on the asphalt and felt the weight of the decision settle on her like something physical. She thought about the cardboard in Beckham's shoe. 11 months of cutting and folding and never asking. She thought about the way he laid his wet socks on the heating vent, without complaint, not because he didn't mind, but because he'd calculated the cost of minding and decided it was too high. She thought about the Dollar Tree candles and the cupcakes from the day-old rack and Solene singing This Little Light of Mine on the hood of the van at sunset. Off-key. Perfect. She thought about the question she'd asked in that van years ago. When does it stop being this? And Solene's answer that made no sense at the time. When I figure out how to go back without losing you. It made sense now. All of it. The van. The parking lots. The hiding. The beautiful lies. Every piece of the puzzle she'd been carrying for 2 years clicked into place in a Denny's parking lot in Bakersfield at dusk. Brecken looked at her mother, then at Stellan, then at Beckham, who was standing beside her with his jaw set and his eyes steady and cardboard in his shoe, and their father's face on his bones. She spoke. It stops being this when we stop hiding. The words came out steady, not loud, not dramatic. Steady in the way that Solene's voice was steady when she said, I chose you. The same steel, the same certainty, coming from a different body now. A smaller one, a 10-year-old one, but carrying the same weight. Solene heard it. Her hand came up to her mouth, not to cover a sob, to hold something in. Brecken didn't know if it was grief or relief or both, but she watched her mother's shoulders drop an inch and understood that something had just been set down. Something heavy, something 10 years old. Brecken thought about the dome light in the van, the one that ran off the dying battery, the one they read by every night until the flashlights came out. She thought about the lantern her mother said she had. "You have a light, baby. Don't let anyone blow it out." She'd believed it was the van, the routine, the systems Solène had built to keep them going, the library trips and the braids and the armor of clean thrift store clothes. She'd thought the light was in the doing, in the holding on, in the stubborn daily act of survival. But standing here now, in this parking lot, with the truth finally out in the open air instead of sealed in a velvet box under a bench seat, she understood. The light was never in the van. It was in the truth, and the truth had been buried for 10 years, and it was finally out, and it hurt, and it was blinding, and it was exactly what they needed. There was no hug, no dramatic embrace, no music swelling moment where everyone fell into each other's arms and the credits rolled. That's not how it works. Not in real life. Not when there are 10 years of damage and distrust and cardboard shoes and custody letters and parking lot childhoods between you. What there was a pause, a stillness. 4 people standing in a parking lot outside a Denny's as the sky went dark and the sign buzzed and the first streetlights came on. 4 people who shared blood and bone, and a last name that 2 of them had never been allowed to use. Standing in the gap between what was and what might be, and not knowing which way to step. Stellan reached into his coat. For a moment Solène tensed, a reflex, the instinct of a woman who'd spent a decade reacting to unexpected movements. But he pulled out nothing dangerous, just his hand, empty. He looked around, spotted a napkin dispenser on the window ledge of the Denny's, left there by a customer, or blown there by the wind. He walked over, took a napkin, pulled a pen from his coat pocket, and wrote his phone number on it. He walked back and held it out, not to Solène, to Brecken. "When you're ready," he said. "If you're ever ready. No pressure, no lawyers, no letters, just a phone number on a napkin." The irony was too thick to ignore. A man worth $2 billion, handing his daughter a napkin from a Denny's with a phone number written in pen. The most expensive communication in his life, delivered on the cheapest possible material. Brecken took it, folded it once, put it in her pocket. Solène spoke. Her voice was rough now, scraped raw by everything she'd said and everything she'd held back. "If this happens, if we do this, it's not at your house, it's not at your office, it's not anywhere that has your name on it." Stellan nodded. "A park," she said. "Somewhere public, somewhere the kids feel safe. And I'm there, the whole time. Every second." "Okay. And if I say it's over, it's over. No arguments, no follow-up calls, no letters." "Okay." She stared at him for a long time, measuring him against the man she'd married, measuring him against the man who'd sent the custody letter, trying to see which one was standing in front of her and whether either of them could be trusted. "Saturday," she said. "Jastrow Park, 10 in the morning. 1 hour. Stellan nodded again. He didn't push for more, didn't negotiate, didn't do any of the things the old version of him would have done. He just accepted it. 1 hour. Neutral ground. Supervised. It was a beginning, nothing more. Stellan turned and walked back to the SUV. His steps were slower going back, heavier, like the conversation had added weight to him rather than removing it. He opened the door, paused, looked back at the van one more time, at his children standing beside it, at the woman standing between them and him. Then he got in, closed the door, started the engine, pulled out of the lot. Solène watched the taillights until they turned onto the street and disappeared. And in that moment, just that one moment, Brecken saw something cross her mother's face that she had never seen there before. Relief. Not happiness, not peace, not forgiveness, relief. The specific, devastating, exhausting relief of a woman who has been holding a door shut for 10 years, bracing against it with her whole body, sleeping against it, eating against it, raising her children against it, and has finally, terribly, been told she can let go. Her shoulders dropped, her hands unclenched. She leaned back against the van and looked up at the sky, and breathed in a way Brecken had never heard her breathe before. deep, full, like she was taking in air for the first time in a decade. The inch between estrangement and beginning is the hardest distance any of them had ever crossed. Harder than the miles between Connecticut and California. Harder than the distance between a penthouse and a parking lot. Harder than the 30 feet of asphalt that separated a van from an SUV. Because miles are geography. Feet are measurement. But that inch, the one between no and maybe, between never and Saturday at 10, between hiding and being found, that inch is made of something else entirely. It's made of trust that hasn't been earned yet, hope that hasn't been tested, fear that hasn't gone away. They crossed it, all four of them, not together, not cleanly, not with certainty, but they crossed it. And in the back of the van that night, lying on the bench seat in the dark, Brecken reached into her pocket and felt the napkin. The phone number. The beginning. She didn't call it. Not yet. But she kept it. If this story hit you somewhere real, drop a comment. Tell me what you would have done in that parking lot. And if you haven't subscribed yet, do it now, because this family's story isn't over, not even close. So here's the thing. I'm not going to stand here and tell you what to take from this. I'm not going to wrap it up in a bow and hand you a lesson like this is a classroom and I'm at the front of it. That's not what this is. This is me sitting across from you, telling you what I saw and what I learned, and letting you decide what it means to you. But I will tell you what it meant to me. Selene loved her children with everything she had. Every parking lot, every can of soup, every pair of socks laid on a heating vent, every Wednesday night in a Denny's bathroom wringing out shirts with raw hands. That was love. Real love. The kind that doesn't ask for credit because it's too busy surviving. But love without truth has a cost. She protected them. She kept them close. She kept them safe from a system that would have separated them and a man who confused ownership with fatherhood. And she was right to run. She was right to choose presence over wealth. She was right about all of it. And she also stole something from them. She stole their father. She stole their name. She stole their history. She stole the answer to the question that Brecken asked on that Tuesday night over a bowl of canned soup. Why don't we have a dad? They did have one. They always had one. And the fact that he was flawed, controlling, dangerous in ways that don't leave marks, doesn't change the fact that his absence left a hole those boys filled with silence and cardboard and questions they were afraid to ask. Both things are true at the same time. Protection saved them, and protection cost them. And there is no version of this story where one cancels out the other. The people who love you most can also be the ones holding the most back from you. Not because they're cruel, not because they want to deceive you, but because the fear runs so deep it forgets where shielding ends and suffocating begins. Selene wasn't hiding the truth to hurt her children. She was hiding it because the truth was connected to a threat, to a system, to a woman, Stellan's mother, who had tried to poison her, to a legal machine that could grind her into nothing and hand her children to people who saw them as assets rather than human beings. She buried the truth to keep them alive. And in doing so, she buried a part of them too. The part that needed to know where they came from. The part that needed a name for the face they saw in the mirror. The part that ached every time Jalen's dad put a hand on his head like it was nothing. Fear does that. It starts as a shield and becomes a wall. And by the time you realize you've walled in the people you were trying to protect, the wall is so high you can't see over it anymore. People talk about bravery like it's always loud, like it's running into a burning building or standing up to someone twice your size. And sometimes it is. But sometimes bravery is the quietest thing in the room. The bravest thing Brecken did was not stepping out of that van. It was not confronting Stellan or demanding answers in a parking lot with untied shoes and shaking hands. The bravest thing she did was standing still, standing in the space between her mother and her father and saying, out loud to both of them, I need the truth now, even if it scares us both. That's the hardest kind of courage, the kind that doesn't move forward or backward, the kind that plants itself in the ground and refuses to accept another day of not knowing, the kind that says I would rather be hurt by the truth than protected by a lie. She was 10. And she understood something that grown adults spend entire lifetimes avoiding. Here's the part that took Brecken years to see. She carried that grenade for 2 years. The ring, the certificate, the photograph. She found them at 8. She said nothing until 10. 2 years of silence. 2 years of holding a secret because she was afraid of what it would do if she let it out. That wasn't random. That was learned. She learned it from Solane, carrying the secret, burying the truth, protecting people by keeping them in the dark. It was the same pattern, handed down without a word, mother to daughter, like eye color or the shape of a jaw. Solane hid Stellan to protect the twins. Brecken hid the envelope to protect Solane. Same instinct, same fear, same cage built out of good intentions. The cycle only broke when Brecken spoke, when she stepped onto that asphalt and said the thing she'd been holding for 2 years. That was the moment the pattern shattered. Not Stellan arriving, not the letter from Fuang, not the SUV in the parking lot. The words, her words, spoken out loud to the people who needed to hear them. Silence protects, but it also preserves the thing you're hiding from. And eventually, preservation becomes permission. Permission for the lie to keep living, and the lie will keep living as long as you let it. Maybe you have a grenade of your own. Something sealed up and tucked away. A question you've been carrying because you're afraid of what the answer will cost. A conversation you've been avoiding because starting it means you can't control where it goes. A truth sitting under the surface of your life, taped shut, hidden under everything else, taking up space you pretend isn't taken. I get it. I do. But I'll tell you what I learned in that parking lot. The cost of asking is always less than the cost of never knowing. Always. Even when the answer is ugly. Even when it changes everything. Even when it breaks something you thought was holding you together. The asking is still cheaper than the silence. Because silence doesn't keep you safe. It keeps you still. And still is not the same as safe. Still is just waiting. And waiting is just another word for hiding. Beckham doesn't need the cardboard anymore. He has shoes that fit. Shoes without holes. Shoes he didn't have to repair every morning with a pair of kitchen scissors and a cereal box. But he kept a piece of it. One square of Cheerios cardboard, cut in the shape of his left foot, folded in half, worn soft at the edges. He keeps it in a drawer. Not framed, not displayed. Just there. In a place where he can reach it when he needs to remember. It's not sentimentality. He's not the sentimental type. It's a monument, a marker, evidence of what he survived, and what it cost, and what he chose not to complain about, because he was 9 years old and understood that his discomfort was a smaller price than his mother's collapse. He looks at it sometimes, holds it, sets it down, goes about his day. That's what survival looks like after the surviving is done. You don't hang it on a wall. You put it in a drawer, and you keep living. Survival is not the end. People treat it like it is. Like getting through the hard part is the destination. Like, once you're out of the van and off the parking lot and past the security guards and the free lunch trays and the kids who call you homeless, you've arrived. You haven't. Survival is not the end of the story. It's the permission slip to begin one. It's the moment you stop holding on and start reaching forward. It's the day you realize that making it through is not the same as making something of it, and that the second part is where the actual living happens. Brecken and Beckham survived. They survived the van and the parking lots and the cafeteria and Trent Muller and the cardboard and the beautiful lies and the terrible truth. They survived all of it, and then they started. We were never homeless. We were hidden. And being found was the thing our mother feared most and needed most, all at once. This family spent a decade running from a truth that was chasing them the whole time. A father who confused love with control. A mother who confused protection with hiding. And 2 children who grew up in the space between those mistakes, carrying the weight of both without knowing what it was called. But they stopped running. In a parking lot, behind a Denny's. At dusk, with untied shoes and a napkin and a phone number and the terrifying necessary decision to stand still and let the truth land. That's what family is, when you strip away everything else. It's not the house, or the money, or the name. It's the willingness to stay in the room when the hard thing is being said. It's the choice to keep showing up after the showing up stops being easy. If this story moved you, hit that like button so hard your phone feels it. Drop the word lineage in the comments if you believe every child deserves the truth about where they come from. And if you're not subscribed yet, tap subscribe and the bell right now, because you do not want to miss what comes next. Because Stellan Moreau did not drive across the country on a whim. Someone sent him that Denny's address. Someone who had been watching Solène for months. Someone who didn't want this family to come back together. They wanted them to stay lost. And the reason why? That story is next. This is Untold Lineage. Every story has a legacy. Make sure yours is worth telling.